I thought I was just stopping by to help my dad with his usual stack of insurance papers. It was routine, something I had done countless times before, fixing the printer he never mastered. Scanning forms, keeping their lives running smoothly in the background. But buried under the bills and medical records was a folder marked in my mother's careful handwriting, estate plan. Final copy. I opened it without thinking, expecting numbers and signatures. What I found was a will that gave everything, the house, the savings, even the insurance, to my brother Mason. My name appeared only once, reduced to a vague line about trust and family. In that moment, every sacrifice I had made, the mortgage payments, the repairs, the groceries, collapsed into silence. They hadn't just written me out of their will. They had written me out of their gratitude. I grew up in a house where responsibility wasn't a choice. It was an assignment, from the moment I was old enough to understand a balance sheet. I was the one expected to keep things steady, while my brother Mason drifted through half-finished college semesters and garage band rehearsals. I built a career, I earned an MBA, secured a project management job, and kept my life in order. But order in my life always meant order for theirs, too. When the furnace broke in the middle of winter, it was my savings that paid the contractor. When the mortgage slipped into dangerous territory 4 years ago, it was my account that quietly wired $11,000. No one asked. They just knew I would step in. Because I always did. Mason, meanwhile, lived at home well into his 20s. He dropped out of school twice, bounced from job to job, and poured money into music equipment that never translated into more than a handful of online clips. Yet, somehow, in my parents' eyes, he wasn't failing, he was searching. Whenever his bills piled up, they called it a rough patch. Whenever I filled the gap, it was described as me being reliable. The scales were tilted from the start. But I convinced myself family wasn't about balance. It was about contribution. The truth is, I contributed because I believed it would mean belonging. Every check I wrote, every grocery bill I covered, every time I rearranged my own plans to fix theirs, I thought it proved my loyalty. And maybe, just maybe, they'd see me not only as their steady daughter but as the child who carried the family forward. That illusion crumbled the day I opened the estate plan. The will didn't just divide assets unequally. It erased me. My parents' words were written in careful legal language, notarized and witnessed, as though permanence itself was proof of fairness. But when I read that everything, house, savings, insurance, was to be left to Mason, and my name was tucked into a single line about trusting us to care for one another, I finally understood what their compliments had always meant. "You've always done well, Danielle. You don't need anything." I had heard that line for years, usually delivered with a smile, as though it were a blessing. It wasn't. It was a cage. It was the excuse that allowed them to demand without asking, to take without acknowledging, to decide without including me. Mason's recklessness wasn't a problem because they could count on me to patch the holes. My success wasn't celebrated because it made me useful, not visible. In their eyes, Mason was the one who needed protection. I was the one who could be taken for granted. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The summer I turned down a job in Boston because Mom said she couldn't sleep if I moved too far away. The countless times I canceled vacations to cover an emergency bill or negotiate with a creditor. Even the small gestures, groceries dropped off, prescriptions refilled, utilities quietly paid, were part of a larger pattern I hadn't recognized. Each act was supposed to earn me gratitude, but all it earned me was silence. The day I found the will, that silence became deafening. I sat on the porch swing I had replaced with my own money 2 summers earlier. And I realized something I should have seen years ago. Loyalty in my family wasn't rewarded. It was weaponized. The more dependable I became, the more invisible I was. They didn't thank me for saving the house from foreclosure. They didn't thank me for wiring thousands of dollars when the retirement accounts collapsed. They didn't thank me for stepping in again and again when Mason couldn't. They just assumed I'd always do it. Until one day, they put it in writing. Everything goes to him. That realization wasn't anger. It was stillness. A heavy, suffocating stillness that came from finally seeing the truth in my family's story. I was never meant to be the heir, the partner, or even the acknowledged daughter. I was just the safety net. And safety nets aren't remembered. They're used. They didn't just erase me from the will. They erased me from their gratitude. And for the first time in my life, I knew I couldn't keep carrying the weight of being steady if it meant disappearing in the process. The first move I made wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was quiet. I simply stopped. I canceled the automatic payments I had set up for their utilities, turned off the weekly grocery delivery, and deleted the reminder on my phone to reorder their medications. It wasn't a declaration of war, it was an experiment. What would happen if I stopped carrying the weight they never thanked me for? For a week, there was nothing. No texts, no calls, no frantic messages. They didn't even notice. The bills came in, the errands piled up, and I stayed silent. A part of me almost laughed. I had spent years believing I was indispensable, that without me the house would collapse. Yet, for 7 days, they floated along, as if my absence were nothing more than a blip. But silence has a way of sharpening edges. By the second week, the messages began. The first came from my father. Water bill came in higher this month. Can you check the account? I stared at it, then locked my phone. I didn't answer. The next day, my mother wrote, "Mortgage is due. Can you send what you usually do?" No greeting, no warmth, just a number attached to my name. This time, I responded with 9 words that felt heavier than anything I had ever typed. Ask Mason. It's his house now. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with her call. I let it ring. She tried again. I declined it. That evening, Mason chimed in. Don't make this a big deal. Just help them like always. His words were the same script they'd all rehearsed for years. Like always. As if my role was permanent. As if my willingness to bleed financially for them was written into the family constitution. I wrote back only once. You're the one they chose. Mason, so be the choice. That was the moment the story began to shift, not in private, but in public. A few days later, I saw the first Facebook post. My mother had uploaded a photo of the porch swing I had replaced with my own money, captioned with a sunflower emoji and the line, "We gave everything to our children." But sometimes love isn't enough. Dozens of likes appeared within hours. Relatives commented with sympathy. You two are such amazing parents. You don't deserve this. Then came my father's post. Longer, sharper. We thought we raised our children right. But in the end, you can't control who turns their back on you. He tagged me. No private call, no conversation. Just a public indictment for the world to see. And of course, Mason added his own flourish. He shared my father's post with a caption. Some people only care when they're getting something. I'd give anything to protect mom and dad. The comments poured in like gasoline on a fire. You're such a good son. Your sister should be ashamed. This generation doesn't understand sacrifice. People who had never seen me pay a single bill were now declaring me greedy and ungrateful. I scrolled through it all in stunned silence, each word pressing down like a weight I didn't deserve. The worst part wasn't the strangers. It was the ones I knew. My cousin Kelly, the same one who once told me I was the glue in this family, left a heart emoji under Mason's post. No words, just that red icon glowing against the screen. That tiny symbol cut deeper than any sentence. It told me that the narrative had been rewritten, and I was no longer the steady daughter or the caretaker. I was the villain. But here's what they didn't realize. Silence wasn't weakness. Silence was strategy. By refusing to defend myself, I let their own words expose them. The more they tried to frame me as ungrateful, the clearer it became that their version of family was built on extraction, not love. That week, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside was a copy of a foreclosure notice, not addressed to me, but to their house. The property was officially at risk. Payments overdue. No buffer left. I sat with it for a long moment, then flipped the page over and wrote one line on the back. Maybe you should have left it to someone who could manage it. I didn't send it. I didn't need to. The truth was already unfolding. And this time, I wasn't going to stop it. They wanted to paint me as the one who walked away. But the reality was simpler. They lost me long before I withdrew my support. They lost me the day they decided gratitude was optional. That Mason's needs mattered more than my sacrifices. That erasing me from a will meant erasing me from their story. What they hadn't counted on was that I was finally ready to let their story collapse without me. They didn't come with apologies. They came with urgency. The call from the front desk reached me mid-morning. Ms. Rivers. Your parents are here, with a man who says he's your brother. I froze for a second, then exhaled. Of course they had shown up. The ignored texts hadn't worked. The guilt-soaked voicemails hadn't landed. Now, they were resorting to spectacle. I told the receptionist calmly, please inform them I'm not available. And they're not expected. But 20 minutes later, a text buzzed on my phone. We're downstairs. Open the door. We're not leaving until you talk to us. I finished the meeting I was in. Answered 2 emails. Let them wait. When I finally stepped outside, the air was sharp and cold. The kind of air that clears your head. They stood in the lobby. 3 figures bunched together like conspirators in a play. My father stiff. My mother clutching her purse. Mason staring at the floor as though even he knew this scene was unsalvageable. No one spoke at first. I stayed by the doorway. Arms crossed. Every muscle steady. The silence stretched until my father broke it. You'd really let us lose the house over this? His tone wasn't pleading. It was accusatory, as though all of this were my crime. I let the words hang before answering. You really thought I wouldn't? His jaw tightened, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. My mother stepped forward, her voice softer, almost trembling. We thought you'd understand. Danielle, you've always been strong. I felt something shift inside me. Those words, the ones they had wielded like a shield my entire life, strong. Steady, reliable, words meant to disguise the taking. Words meant to justify the forgetting. I shook my head. You used that as an excuse to forget me. She flinched. My father bristled, ready to fire back, but Mason spoke first. His voice was low, defensive. I didn't ask for any of this. I turned toward him, sharp but calm. You didn't stop it either. You took it all, and now you can keep it. He opened his mouth, then closed it. No defense, no apology, just silence. My father tried to step closer, his voice rising, brittle with frustration. We fed you, raised you, gave you everything. I cut him off with a small, measured laugh. Not cruel, not mocking, but final. You gave me a job, not a voice. You erased me from your plans and expected me to keep carrying yours. The words landed heavier than I intended. He froze, searching for a retort, but none came. My mother's lip trembled. Her eyes darted toward the ground as if she were looking for a softer version of this reality. One that didn't exist. They thought they could still push through me. Still persuade me. Still manipulate me into fixing what they had broken. But the moment had already shifted. I wasn't the caretaker anymore. I wasn't the safety net. I was the wall. When my father took a step toward the elevator, I raised my hand. Don't. My voice was calm, even. You're not coming up. You're not coming in. I won't be your answer this time. The stillness that followed was almost unbearable. Thick with everything unsaid. My father's eyes burned with anger. My mother's shoulders sagged with quiet shame. Mason just looked away, jaw tight, knowing that the role of chosen son came with a bill he was finally going to have to pay. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then I turned back toward the building doors, my hand steady on the glass. You didn't lose me when you changed the will. You lost me when you decided I'd never walk away. I stepped inside, leaving them in the lobby. 3 people who once called themselves my family. I didn't need to slam the door. The silence I left behind was louder than anything they could shout. The collapse didn't come with fireworks. It came with paperwork. A month after I refused to step back in, the mortgage officially defaulted. The notices turned into warnings. The warnings into filings. And finally, a for sale sign stood crooked in the front yard of the house I had once saved 3 separate times. The same house where I patched railings, paid furnace bills, and covered property taxes without hesitation, now left to rot under the very hands that swore I would understand. My parents scrambled. They called every relative, every family friend, trying to stitch together a story that painted them as victims of an ungrateful daughter. Mason drained what little remained of the life insurance payout in the accounts they had left him. He spent it chasing another dream. Another half-baked project that would burn cash but never build anything real. This time, though, no one was coming to clean it up. The community noticed. Neighbors who once admired my father's work ethic whispered about the sudden foreclosure. Relatives who had clicked like on Mason's self-righteous Facebook posts started asking quiet questions. If Danielle was so ungrateful, why had she been the one paying the bills for years? If Mason was such a hero, why hadn't he saved the house? The silence I gave them became louder than any defense I could have spoken. They had written me out of the will. Now, life was writing its own verdict. I didn't attend the estate sale. I didn't need to see strangers carry out the furniture I once dusted as a teenager or the porch swing I'd replaced with my own paycheck. I did walk by one evening, though, on my way home from work. The lawn was patchy, the shutters half hanging, the porch light dead, and there it was, the sign staked into the soil, for sale. It should have hurt, but instead, it felt like truth carved in wood. That house had never kept me. I had kept it. For years, I was the unseen foundation propping up walls that weren't built to last. And now, stripped of my labor, it was crumbling like it always would have without me. The gossip swirled louder online. My parents doubled down with vague posts about children who turn their backs, and a generation that doesn't understand sacrifice. Mason posted too, sharing photos of himself sitting on the porch steps like a fallen martyr. Adding captions about loyalty and family love. The comments piled up. You're such a good son. Your sister should be ashamed. I didn't answer. I didn't correct them. I didn't send proof of the checks. The wire transfers. The receipts that lived in my folders. The people who wanted a story already had one. And the ones who knew the truth didn't need convincing. Meanwhile, I started to rebuild, not in anger, but in clarity. I rented a small loft with big windows and no ghosts in the walls. I consulted for women-led startups, helping them structure their finances so no one could ever exploit their reliability the way my family had exploited mine. At night, I slept without my phone on silent, without waiting for the next emergency that only I could solve. The last time I saw the old house was on a Saturday morning. A moving truck idled in the driveway. Strangers hauling boxes out the door. My parents weren't there. Mason wasn't there. Just men in uniforms packing away remnants of a family that had chosen their favorite child and lost everything for it. I stood on the sidewalk, a passerby now, and didn't take another step closer. Sometimes collapse is justice. Sometimes letting go is the loudest act of defiance. They thought they could erase me with a notarized signature. Instead, they erased themselves, leaving nothing behind but debts and echoes. I turned and walked home. The crisp air sharp on my skin. My chest light for the first time in years. The house would belong to someone else soon. But me? I finally belonged to myself. In the quiet of my own apartment. Life finally belonged to me. I cooked for myself, paid only my bills, and slept through the night without the constant vibration of messages demanding my help. The silence that once felt heavy had turned into peace. For the first time in years. I wasn't bracing for the next crisis, because the crisis wasn't mine anymore. I thought about the will. About the empty words that said my brother deserved everything. But the truth was simpler. They didn't lose me when they wrote me out of their estate plan. They lost me long before. When they assumed I would always show up. Always sacrifice. Always give without question. That was the day they stopped seeing me as a daughter and started treating me like a resource. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It made me whole. I no longer carried debts that weren't mine. Or guilt that wasn't earned. Sometimes you don't need to set the fire. You just stop carrying the water. And when you do, the whole illusion collapses on its own. Maybe you've lived something like this yourself. Cut out of decisions. Taken for granted. Erased by the very people who should have seen you most clearly. If you have, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. And if you believe in justice, in boundaries, and in freedom from betrayal, subscribe to this channel. There are more stories here, true stories, where silence becomes strength. And walking away is the beginning of a new life.